Yes. Fine. Ha, madam.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll start. Ha. Madam, audible? Am I audible?
Yes, madam. You are audible. And
I'll
recording.
start, ma'am. Recording is there, ma'am. It's going on. It's going on. I'll start, huh?
No.
Okay. Good morning, students. So today we are going to discuss part test 1 chapters in today's 4 sessions. So part test 1 will be dealt based on the PU first year botany chapters. So in that we'll have a glance on all the PU first year botany chapters one by one. So let us start with the first chapter as per our syllabus, that is nothing but the chapter living world. Okay. Okay, students. In this chapter, in the first part, you have learned about the basic characteristics of living organisms. All living organisms exhibit some unique characteristics or features which you don't find in non-living things. So let us have a glance on all those characteristics. The very first among them is growth. So what is growth? Growth is nothing but increase in mass and increase in number of individuals, which are the basic twin characters of growth. Okay. So there are different types of growth. For example, if you take unicellular organisms, cell division or one important thing here is in plants the growth by cell division occurs continuously throughout their lifespan, whereas in animals the growth is seen only up to a certain stage. Okay, so and the kind of growth exhibited by living things and non-living things is quite different. For example, if you take the kind of growth exhibited by non-living objects is by accumulation of material on the surface, whereas in living organisms growth is from inside. One more very important thing what you have to remember here is the growth is considered to be a non-defining property. Okay, why it is considered as a non-defining property? Because non-living things also exhibit growth. The very next character among the characteristics of living organisms is reproduction. So students, what is reproduction? You are very well aware of. Reproduction is nothing but a physiological process in which living organisms give birth to young ones of their similar kind. So there are different modes of reproduction. The very two common modes are sexual and asexual modes. Okay, asexual modes of reproduction include fragmentation. Okay, it can be by budding, it can be by fission, it can be by regeneration, etc., etc. Sexual reproduction involves basically different types. Okay, that is formation of gametes compulsorily. Okay, fertilization, that is fusion of gametes. Okay, and formation of zygote, which leads to embryo formation and that develops into a young individual. So there are different types of reproduction, sexual and asexual. And there are one important thing here is all living organisms, it is not compulsion for all living organisms to undergo reproduction. There are many organisms which do not reproduce. Okay, and which are those you are aware of? That is mules, sterile worker bees, infertile human couples, etc. And that is the reason reproduction is considered as and all, it cannot be considered as an all inclusive defining property of living organisms. plants. Okay, so now we have the next character or next feature, that is nothing but metabolism. So what is metabolism, children? Metabolism is nothing but it is defined as the sum total of all the chemical reactions that occur within a cell, and it includes catabolism as well as anabolism. And important thing here to be remembered is an isolated metabolic reaction outside the body of an organism which can be performed in a test tube is neither living nor non-living. Hence, while metabolism is a defining feature of all living organisms without any exception, isolated metabolic reactions in vitro are not living things but surely living reactions. Hence, what you can conclude here is cellular organization of the body is a defining feature of all life forms. Okay. So now let us go to the next slide. Consciousness, okay, which is also considered one of the major characteristics of living organisms. Okay, so what is consciousness, students? Conscious is nothing but awareness about the surrounding. Okay, there are living organisms which have consciousness. They respond to the various environmental stimuli. Okay, and these stimuli can be physical, chemical, or biological. We sense our environment through our sense organs. Plants also respond. Okay, if you take the example of plants, they too have the ability to respond to various external factors like you say light, water, temperature, etc., etc., even some of the pollutants, etc. One important thing here is human being is the only organism who is aware of himself, that is it has he or she has self consciousness. So consciousness therefore becomes the defining property of living organism. Now we'll come to the next part in this chapter, what you have studied, that is nothing but diversity in the living world. Each different kind of plant, animal, or organism, what you see around you, constitute a different species. Okay, and this presence of different kinds of plants, animals, or organism constitute biodiversity. You should know that the number of species that are known and described till now, they have a range, and that range is nothing but 1.7 to 1.8 million species. Okay, I repeat, 1.7 to 1.8 million species are known and described. Estimates are very high, farther than this range. Okay, and to name, to identify, and to classify these organisms, we'll start from the basic. You should know that there are different local and scientific names, okay, which fall under the category of nomenclature and identification. Okay, local names have some drawbacks. Okay, you all know that local names have some drawbacks. What are those drawbacks you are well aware of? That local names would vary from place to place, even within a particular country, and there will be a lot of confusion when you have local names for different plants and animals. That is why the scientific naming or the nomenclature is very important, because we have a vast variety of species which exist around us. That's the reason we should go for scientific naming or nomenclature and identification. And this nomenclature and identification for plants is done according to the ICBN. So what is ICBN? International Code for Botanical Nomenclature. Yes, it is for nomenclature of different plant species. Similarly, we have International Code for of Zoological Nomenclature, that is ICZN, which is specifically for animal species. And these scientific names ensure that each organism has only one name, and description of any organism should enable the different people to arrive at the same name or at the same conclusion. Okay, and there are universally accepted principles to provide scientific names to different organisms. Okay, so under nomenclature, we have different systems. The very important among them is binomial nomenclature. This binomial nomenclature was proposed by Carolus Linnaeus. Okay, so under binomial nomenclature, we know that each name has two components. One is called as the generic name, and the other one is called as the specific epithet. For example, one example is quoted here, that is Mangifera indica. So what is Mangifera indica? The common name is mango. Okay, so Mangifera indica, Mangifera represents the genus here and indica represents the species here. There are different universal rules, children, you know that, for nomenclature under binomial nomenclature. Like for example, biological names are generally in Latin and written in italics. Okay, the first word represents the genus, second represents the epithet. Okay, when both the words are used in biological name, when they are handwritten, they should be separately underlined, printed in italics, etc., etc. These are the universal rules you are well aware of. I don't want to go into much details. Okay, and based on different characteristics, all living organisms can be classified into different taxa, and this concept is of classification is called as taxonomy. So what is taxonomy? Taxonomy is nothing but the science of classification of organisms. Okay, then under taxonomy we have different things here what you have learned already. Okay, so for example, let us take the example of human beings. Human beings were since long not only interested, okay, in knowing more about the different kinds of organisms and their diversities, but also the relationships among them. And this branch of study was referred to as systematics. Okay, so what is systematics? Systematics is nothing but knowing the different organisms, their diversities, and also the relationships which exist among them. This branch is referred to as systematics. And there is a very famous book that is Systema Naturae, which was written by Carolus Linnaeus. This was the title of his book, Systema Naturae. Okay, and we should also know that the scope of systematics was later enlarged or expanded to include various concepts like identification, nomenclature, and classification. And it should also be emphasized here that systematics takes into account evolutionary relationships. That is what we call today as phylogeny. Okay, evolutionary relationships between organisms. Okay, and now we have taxonomic categories. So in taxonomic category, what is a taxonomic category basically? Taxonomic category is nothing but a part of the overall taxonomic arrangement. Okay, and that overall taxonomic arrangement puts a particular organism in a hierarchical order, and that itself is called as taxonomic hierarchy. What is taxonomic hierarchy? All the categories when put together constitutes the taxonomic hierarchy. So you should be very clear with these concepts: what is category, what is taxonomic hierarchy. And we have one more very important concept in this chapter, living world, that is called as taxon. Okay, or plural taxa. What is taxon, students? Each category which is referred to as a unit of classification, which also represents a rank, is called as taxon. Okay, then under this tax, for example, if I take kingdom, when you go from one category to another category, I can just read out here, I can just read out orally, which is not mentioned in the slide. Species, which is the basic unit. If you go in the reverse order, we have species, genus, family, order, okay, and then class, phylum, kingdom, etc. Or if you start from kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, etc. So in this way, I have given the systematics of human being as an example here in this particular slide. All of you can see, okay, systematics of human being, which starts from the very first level, that is nothing but kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, then class Mammalia, order Primata, family Hominidae, genus Homo, and species is Sapiens. And you should also emphasize one thing here, that as you go higher from species to kingdom, the number of common characters goes on decreasing. This is a very important point. I repeat, as you move from species to kingdom, the number of common characteristics goes on decreasing. So I mean to say here, lower the taxa, more are the characteristics that the members will share, or they have common characteristics in lower taxa. Okay, higher the category. And one more thing here, higher is the category, it is the difficulty is more to determine the relationships with different taxa. Okay, so this is the overall arrangement or systematics of human being as an example. Let us go to the next slide. So in this slide, you can see a tabular column in which organisms with their taxonomic categories are depicted here. This is directly taken from your textbook. Okay, already you can see. So the table expresses the common name, biological name, genus, family, order, class. That means the systematic classification of different examples like man, housefly, mango, beet, etc. So man, I have already explained. Housefly, if you take Musca domestica, the scientific name, genus Musca, Mucidae, Diaptera is the order, Insecta is the class, and Arthropoda is the phylum. Okay, and similarly we have mango, Mangifera indica, and similarly we have beet, that is Triticum aestivum, as an example for us. Okay, So now we'll come to the next part in this chapter, that is nothing but the taxonomical aids. Okay, so student, what do you mean by taxonomical aids? Taxonomical aids is any kind of help or any kind of assistance we use in order to take up taxonomic studies of various plant or animal species. Okay, and these studies would require proper classification and identification of organisms. Okay, so we have different taxonomical aids under this category. The first one here is herbarium. Okay, so what is herbarium? You are quite aware of this. Okay, herbarium is nothing but a storehouse of collected plant specimens that are dried, pressed, and preserved on sheets. Okay, and these sheets are arranged in a proper manner according to some universally accepted system of classification. Okay, and the specimens with the descriptions on and one way quick, we have botanical gardens. So these gardens have collections of living plants for reference. Okay, plant species in these gardens are grown for identification purposes, and each plant is labeled. It's given a proper labeling which indicates its botanical names or scientific name, its family, its details, etc. So we have different botanical gardens. The number one here is the famous botanical gardens, which is at Kew, England. Okay, Indian Botanical Garden located at Howrah, India, and National Botanical Research Institute, which is located at Lucknow, India. Similarly, we have museum as the next taxonomical aid. So what are museum? Museums are generally nothing but they have collections of preserved plant and animal specimens for study and references. These specimens are preserved in containers or jars, as you all know, using preservative solutions. Okay, and specimens may also be preserved in the form of dried form. Okay, for example, I can tell you insects will be preserved in small boxes after collecting them, killing them, and pinning them, etc., etc. And these materials are used for study and reference as a reference material. And museums are also having collections of different skeletons of animals too. Okay, similarly, we have next aid as the zoological parks. What are these zoological parks? Zoological parks are the places where wild animals are kept in protected environments under human care. Okay, and these animals, all these animals in a zoo are provided a safe place. As far as possible, they are provided a safe environment, the conditions which simulate to their natural habitats, which are very, very important. Okay, so these serve as zoological parks. Similarly, we have next taxonomical aid as the key. Okay, so what is key, students? Keys is another taxonomical aid which is used for identification material. Okay, keys is mainly based on the usage of similar and dissimilar characteristics. The keys are based on contrasting characteristics. Okay, and these contrasting characters are generally referred in the form of a pair, and each pair is called as couplet. Okay, and this statement each statement in the key is referred to as a lead. So you have to remember these two terminologies, very important, couplet and key. So what is couplet? The keys are based on contrasting characters, and in a pair, each pair is called couplet, and each statement in the key is called as a or is referred to as a lead. Okay, so this is about the different taxonomical aids what we have discussed now. Okay, you can see the pictures of botanical garden here, a herbarium sheet here. Okay, herbarium sheet, a museum, and a zoological park. Okay, so now students, let us go to the next chapter, that is nothing but biological classification. So this chapter is very, very, very important chapter with respect to NEET point of view, because every year you see a considerable number of questions appearing from this chapter. Okay, so in this chapter, in the very first part of this chapter, we have studied the systems of classification. Okay, systems of classification. So you are well aware, students, that systems of classification have drastically changed from the earlier times till now. Earlier times, there were two kingdom system of classification. Okay, there were two kingdom system of classification which was proposed by Carolus Linnaeus, and this two kingdom system of classification included two very prominent kingdoms, that is kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animalia. So what is this kingdom Plantae and Animalia. In Plantae, in kingdom Plantae, all the photosynthetic organisms were placed, whereas in kingdom Animalia, non-photosynthetic heterotrophs, okay, without cell wall were placed under this category. Students, as you can recall, this system was used till very recently, and this system had many drawbacks. One of the major drawbacks of this system was it was not able to distinguish between the eukaryotes and prokaryotic organisms. Another thing was unicellular and multicellular organisms were not properly separated out. Okay, so there were, considering these drawbacks, this system ran for many years, but considering these drawbacks, further changes were made to this system. New kingdoms were supposed to be added in the previous times. Then we have, after that, we have the three kingdom system classification, which was proposed by Ernest Haeckel. The three kingdom included kingdom Plantae, kingdom Animalia, and the new kingdom was added, that is called as kingdom Protista. So what is this kingdom Protista? Kingdom Protista includes all the unicellular eukaryotic organisms. Okay, so all the unicellular eukaryotes were separated. Okay, they may be photosynthetic or non-photosynthetic, okay, but unicellular organisms were separated out from these multicellular groups. Similarly, we have four kingdom system classification, which was proposed by Copeland. The fourth kingdom which was added was Monera. So how Monera was separated out? Monera was separated out based on the cell type, that is all the prokaryotic organisms were separated out. Okay, like then we had Plantae, Animalia, Protista, Monera. And today what we follow is nothing but the five kingdom system classification proposed by Whitaker. And we all know what are those five kingdoms: Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. Whitaker added a new kingdom, that is kingdom Fungi or kingdom Mycota. Okay, he separated this fungi from Plantae based on one major character, that is nothing but the mode of nutrition. Okay, of course there are many characters also in with respect to plants. In when you compare fungi, that is cell wall characteristic is different and the stored food material is different, but major concept what he used was mode of nutrition, because you know that fungi are all heterotrophic organisms. Okay, so today what we follow is nothing but the five kingdom system of classification. Okay, so this five kingdom system, as you all know, was proposed by Whitaker, as I've already said, in the year 1969. The main criteria which was used for this five kingdom system were the cell structure, body organization, mode of nutrition, reproduction, and phylogenetic relationships. Okay, so these were the basic criteria which were used in his methods of classification. And now here you can see a tabular column or a table which is depicting the details of the five kingdom classification taken from your NCERT book only. The table depicts the various characters, that is cell type, cell wall, nuclear membrane, nature, body organization, mode of nutrition. Okay, so we have five kingdom: Monera, Protista. If you take Monera, prokaryotic organism, all others are eukaryotes. Cell wall is polysaccharide and amino acid containing in Monera, whereas in others, in Protista, cell wall may or may not be present. Fungi, it is present without cellulose, it is made up of chitin. Plantae, it is cellulosic cell wall, and in Animalia it is absent. Nuclear membrane, only in Monera it is absent. In remaining all other groups, if you take, nuclear membrane is present because they are all eukaryotes. Body organization can be cellular, multicellular, tissue, or organ or organ system level. Mode of nutrition in Monera, if you take, they may be autotrophs as well as heterotrophs, whereas in Protista also same, they may be auto or heterotrophs. In fungi, if you take, exclusively they are heterotrophic organisms. In Plantae, exclusively autotrophs, and in Animalia it is heterotrophic group, okay, which may be holozoic or saprophytic in nature. Okay, so now one more important thing I would like to highlight here, that is nothing but the, apart from this five kingdom system of classification, there is one more thing that is called a six kingdom system of classification, which was basically proposed by Carl Oss. And this system is also called as the three domain system of classification. Okay, so what are the three domains? You can see clearly on your slide. The three domains are nothing but bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. A slight change was made in the kingdom Monera by Carl Woese. Okay, remaining all other kingdoms, if you take, okay, plants, animalia, fungi, protists, all were kept as it is. A simple change was done to kingdom Monera. Monera was split into two different kingdoms, that is eubacteria and archaebacteria. So what was the basis of this classification? The major criterion for this classification was the nature of 16S rRNA. Okay, so 16S rRNA of archaebacteria is different from that of eubacteria. That was one consideration. Apart from that, also the cell wall nature of archaebacteria is different from that of eubacteria. That is the reason eubacteria were placed in a separate kingdom only, and that makes the six kingdom system of classification. Okay, now we'll come to the first part, that is nothing but kingdom Monera. Okay, so kingdom Monera includes what? First of all, you should know kingdom Monera includes two major groups here, that is archaebacteria and the eubacteria. Okay, so let us talk about this eubacteria. So what are these bacteria? Bacteria are nothing but they are the sole members, actually, I should say. These are the organisms which occur everywhere. They are used in our day-to-day life. They can be beneficial, they can be harmful, they can be parasite, they can be even what do you say, uh, uh, disease causing pathogenic organisms. They're found in different habitats like deserts, snow, deep oceans, means extreme conditions. Okay, they exhibit different shapes. Okay, so what are the different shapes of bacteria you are well aware of? They are broadly divided into cocci, okay, bacilli, spirilla, and vibrio. Cocci, you can give the example of streptococcus, bacilli, diplococcus, which are cocci. Bacilli, you can give example of lactobacilli. You can give the example of genus Bacillus itself. You can even give the example of Clostridium, okay, Rhizobium. These are bacilli. Spirilla, okay, spirilla are those bacteria which are having tough flagella at their ends, okay. And we have Vibrio, okay, which are comma-shaped bacteria. Vibrio cholera is the best example here. So they exhibit different shapes, okay, and this refers to the morphology of bacteria. With respect to nutrition, also you can divide bacteria into different groups, students. Okay, so based on nutrition, how you can divide the bacteria? You can divide them into two broad categories, that is heterotrophic types and autotrophic types. Okay, so bacteria can be autotrophs, bacteria can be heterotrophs. Okay, so what are autotrophs? First I will tell you what are autotrophs, who can prepare their own food. Okay, and these autotrophs can be of two different types further. They can be photosynthetic autotrophs or they can be chemosynthetic autotrophs. Okay, so who are these photosynthetic autotrophs? Those organisms which depend on light, which carry out photosynthesis. Examples under this category are purple sulfur bacteria, green sulfur bacteria. Okay, like you can take the example of Promasium, Chlorobium. These are the very good examples of photosynthetic bacteria. Okay, similarly we have chemosynthetic bacteria. What are these chemosynthetic bacteria? These are nothing but they oxidize various inorganic substances like nitrates, nitrites, or even ammonia, and that energy that is released, that is used for ATP production. Okay, so example under this category are nitrifying bacteria, which is a very good example. So now let us come to the heterotrophs. Heterotrophic bacteria can be divided into two broad categories, that is saprophytic and parasitic. If you refer some other material, you will have one more category here, that is symbiotic organisms. Okay, you can even include that also. But here, as per this, we have two subtypes here, saprophytes and parasites. Okay, saprophytes, it's mentioned bacteria of decay. Parasites which depend on the host, for example, streptococci. Okay, these are parasites, usually disease causing organisms, pathogenic organisms. Okay, so this is the one basic method of dividing bacteria based on their nutrition. Now we'll move to the next group here. As I said, you in kingdom Monera, we have eubacteria and archaebacteria are the two major groups here. Let us come to the archaebacteria. So what are these archaebacteria, students? Okay, these bacteria are very special. Okay, why they are special? Because these bacteria are found in extreme or harsh habitats. Okay, and one important thing what you should remember about these bacteria is they have different cell wall structure from the other eubacteria. Their cell wall structure is is different from that of other eubacteria. I would like to mention one thing here. Not only cell wall, their cell membrane also is different from that of other bacteria. Okay, cell membrane usually consists of monolayer of lipids in which ether bonds are present, not ester bonds. Okay, I repeat my words. In cell membrane, ether bonds are present, which consist of monolayer of lipids. Okay, instead of ester bonds. That also makes one major difference between archaea and the eubacteria. And one more is the cell wall. In cell wall, peptidoglycan is said to be usually absent in archaebacteria. Okay, and one more thing I would like to tell here: archaebacteria is unique in what way? In their 16S rRNA is different from that of eubacteria. And one more thing to add up here is they have histones. Okay, this is very a different character. They have histones. Okay, and usually we know that histones are a property of eukaryotic organisms. They are absent in prokaryotes. But even though archaebacteria are prokaryotes, they have histones in their DNA material. Okay, so that is one. And now these archaebacteria, you should know that they are divided into three broad categories. Okay, they're divided into three broad categories. Number one is methanogens, second is halophiles, and third one is the thermoacidophiles. Okay, you can see here methanogens, halophiles, and thermoacidophiles. What are these methanogens? Methanogens are nothing but these are the bacteria which harvest energy by converting hydrogen and carbon dioxide into methane gas. Okay, and they are usually found. Methanogens are usually present in the gut of several ruminant animals such as cows, buffaloes, etc. And methanogens are very important for biogas production. You all know that. Okay, they're anaerobic bacteria. They live in intestinal tracts. Okay, they are methane producers. Okay, then similarly we have extreme halophiles, salt-loving bacteria which are found in the salty areas like Great Salt Lake, Dead Sea, etc. And these halophiles are also known for some unique features you should know. Those unique features are they are said to be having a pigmented bacteria, and they carry out photophosphorylation. Very important thing I'm telling here, they carry out they are not photosynthetic students. Don't mistake me. They are not photosynthetic, but they do photophosphorylation. Means I mean to say they produce ATP utilizing the energy of light. Photosynthetic, they only produce ATP. They don't fix carbon dioxide like plants. Okay, so this is one unique characteristic of this halophilic bacteria which are found in what do you say, high salt regions. Similarly, we have last one, that is the thermoacidophiles or thermophiles, which live in acidic environment and at a very high temperature like hot springs, volcanic vents, etc. Okay, and these thermoacidophiles are used for different research purposes. Their enzymes are highly thermally active, so in this regard they are helpful for many of the research activities. So these are the three major types of archaebacteria. Let us now come to the further details of eubacteria. As I said, I have said this, eubacteria can be divided into two major groups here, as I said that is autotrophs or heterotrophs. Already I have explained. Autotrophs can be photosynthetic autotrophs and chemosynthetic autotrophs. Okay, photosynthetic autotrophs, I have given the examples earlier, like what examples I have given. I have told Chromatium, Chlorobium, that is nothing but purple sulfur and green sulfur bacteria. In eubacteria, one of the major photosynthetic autotrophs are blue-green algae, that is nothing but our cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria fall under eubacteria, and these cyanobacteria are those organisms which are having chlorophyll A, similar to the green plants. They are photosynthetic autotrophs. Okay, and these cyanobacteria are also known for one of the major functions, that is nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation occurs in a specialized cell which is called as heterocyst. You can see the picture here on this slide, heterocyst. Heterocyst is a special cell which is different from all the other cells, specialized for nitrogen fixation because this cell is permeable to only nitrogen and impermeable to oxygen, and usually it is non-photosynthetic cell. Okay, so the process of nitrogen fixation occurs, and they are photosynthetic organisms, blue-green algae. And one more thing about blue-green algae is these organisms can be unicellular, colonial, colonial filamentous, etc. Colonies are generally surrounded by gelatinous sheath. Okay, and one more thing here is they often form blooms in polluted water bodies. That is what we call as algal bloom. These are the organisms responsible for this algal bloom formation. Okay, examples you can give: nostoc, anabina, anabina, etc., etc. Now we'll come to the chemosynthetic autotrophs. I've already said chemosynthetic organisms are those which oxidize various inorganic substances like nitrates, nitrites for ATP production, and the economic importance is they are used for recycling of nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, sulfur, etc. Heterotrophic bacteria. Now we'll come to the heterotrophic bacteria. I have already said in heterotrophic bacteria we can divide them as saprophytes, you can divide them as parasites, and you can even classify them as symbiotic organisms. And these heterotrophic bacteria majorly play a role as decomposers. They are used in milk curdling process like lactobacilli. They are used in nitrogen fixation. For example, if you take rhizobia, Azotobacter, zoospirillum, they can be pathogens. They reproduce by means of organism eubacteria. This reproduction is not only for heterotrophic bacteria, what you are seeing on the slide. This reproduction is for overall eubacteria. So how do they reproduce? Eubacteria reproduce by means of fission, by means of sporulation, and also by means of conjugation. Conjugation is a method which is a sort of sexual reproduction by in which the bacteria adopt a primitive method of DNA transfer from one bacterium to another bacterium. Okay. So these are the details we have discussed with respect to the kingdom Monera, what I have highlighted. Now we'll come to the next kingdom, student, that is nothing but the kingdom Protista. Okay, so what are these protistans? Protistans include all these single-celled eukaryotic organisms. Okay, but very important thing what you should remember is the boundaries of this kingdom are not well defined. Okay, so why they are not well defined? Because if you take an example of any photosynthetic protestant like Euglena, which is a photosynthetic protestant, for one person, this can be a plant. For another person, this can be included under Protista because of its unicellular nature. Okay, so members of Protista, if you take, they are not having a proper boundaries. And one more thing, this kingdom Protista, it forms a link with the other kingdoms like Plantae, Animalia, fungi, etc. Okay, and when you come to the proper general characters of protestant cell body, the protestant cell has a well-defined nucleus, other membrane-bound organelles, and cell wall may or may not be present. And reproduction can be by sexual and asexual methods, which by a process that includes cell fusion, zygote formation, formation of certain structures like spores, etc. So now this protistans, kingdom Protista, is divided into different groups, what you can see on your slides, that is chrysophytes, dinoflagellates, euglenoids, slime molds, and protozoans. Okay, so in this, if you see, chrysophytes, dinoflagellates, and euglenoids are photosynthetic organisms. Slime molds and protozoans, slime molds particularly specifically saprophytes, and protozoans can be considered as a parasitic or predator organism. They both of these are heterotrophic organisms. Okay, so now we'll come to these things one by one. Chrysophytes, let us quickly come to chrysophytes. So what are these chrysophytes? It includes diatoms and golden algae, what you call as desmids. They are microscopic and they float passively in water currents. Okay, these are the planktonic organisms. They float passively. What do you mean they float passively, student? They are not having flagella. Okay, they do not have flagella. That's why their movement is passive. The cell walls show soap box arrangement. This is a very, very important thing here. The cell walls, what is the meaning of soap box arrangement? The cell walls form two thin overlapping shells which fit together in the form of a soap box. That's called soap box arrangement. And one more thing here is the walls are embedded with silica and thus indestructible. The walls are embedded with silica and thus indestructible. And one more thing here is they show deposition of the silica material, and that is called as a diatomaceous earth or kieselguhr. And this is used in for various purposes like polishing, filtration of oils, syrups, etc. And another important thing here is diatoms are considered as the chief producers in oceans. dinoflagellates. And these, what are these dinoflagellates? These dinoflagellates appear yellow, green, brown, blue, or red depending upon their pigments. Okay, they are photosynthetic organisms. The cell wall has stiff cellulose plates on the outer surface. Okay, they bear two flagella. One is longitudinal and other is a transverse, which is in a furrow between the wall plates. Okay, and these dinoflagellates, if you take one very good example, that is guanologs. Guanologs is one which is known to form the red tides. Okay, and it's called as red dinoflagellate. What are these red tides? These organisms like guanologs, it undergo rapid multiplication in such a way that they make the sea appear red, and this is referred to as red tides. And one thing to be added here is these dinoflagellates release toxins, okay, in a high quantity, and that can be used to kill other organisms, marine animals like fishes, etc. So these are the things here. These are the pictures you can see for example gymnodium. Okay, and now let us go to the next slide, that is euglenoids. Okay, what are these euglenoids? Euglenoids are those organisms which are majorly found in freshwater system, okay, and particularly in stagnant water. And these organisms have a protein rich layer. They have a protein rich layer which is called as pellicle. Okay, instead of cell wall, they do not have cell wall, rather they have a pellicle which makes their body flexible. They bear two flagella, one is called as short, another one is a longer one. Okay, and the important thing is they behave as plants as well as animals. That means they can be phototrophs as well as heterotrophs. In the absence of light, they behave as heterotrophs. In the presence of light, they act as phototrophs. Okay, and their pigments are similar or identical to those of the higher plant, that is they bear chlorophyll A and B similar to the higher plants. Example for this group is Euglena. Slime molds. Okay, so slime molds, as I said in classification, slime molds are exclusively saprophytic protistans. Okay, under suitable conditions, they form an aggregation that is called as plasmodium. Okay, and during unfavorable conditions, the plasmodium differentiates and form fruiting bodies which bear spores at their tips, and the spores possess true walls. This is very important. Slime molds in their vegetative form in the plasmodium stage, they do not possess cell wall, whereas in the spore stage, in the sporulation stage, they possess true walls, which is a unique feature about these organisms. Okay, and they are extremely resistant and these spores are extremely resistant and survive for many years under adverse conditions, and the spores are usually dispersed by means of air currents. Okay, and these are the important things here about the slime mold. What you have to remember is, under favorable conditions, they form aggregation called as plasmodium. Under unfavorable conditions, it differentiates to form fruiting bodies which has spores, and spores can persist for a longer time because they are the resistant structures and they have true walls, and the spore dispersal occurs by means of air currents. Let's come to the last group of this particular classification, protozoans. What are these protozoans? These are all heterotrophic organisms. They can live as predators or parasites. Okay, and four major groups are there among the protozoans. Which are the four major groups, children? You all know that amoeboid protozoans is the first group, flagellated protozoan is the second group. Okay, and then we have third one as nothing but the ciliated protozoan, and last one is the sporozoan. So what are these amoeboid protozoans? Amoeboid protozoans are those which move and capture their prey by putting out pseudopodia. They have pseudopodia, as what is nothing but the false feet. Okay, and one unique feature about amoeboid protozoans is the marine forms of silica shells on their surface. There's a very rare, unique character you must remember, students. Marine forms of silica shells on their surfaces. Example under this category, parasitic example you can take Entamoeba histolytica, which is a parasite of intestine. Similarly, we have flagellated protozoans, which have flagella as a locomotory structure. Okay, and the members of this group can be free living or parasitic. Parasitic forms, example, if you take trypanosoma is a very good example, which is known to cause the sleeping sickness. Next group is ciliated protozoans, which show presence of thousands of cilia. They have a cavity that opens to the outside of this cell. That cavity is called as gullet. Okay, and the movement of rows of cilia will cause the food, which is water laden, to be steered, or it allows the food to enter through the gullet. Okay, and the example under this category is paramecium. The last group is sporozoan. These organisms include, they have an infectious spore-like stage in their life cycle. They include Plasmodium as a very good example, which causes malaria. Okay, and we have okay, so we have now completed the 4 groups under the protozoans. Now we'll come to the next kingdom under this chapter, that is kingdom fungi. So kingdom fungi includes all heterotrophs, which can be saprophytes, parasitic symbionts. They can be disease causing. The very good example under this category is Puccinia, which causes wheat rust. They are multicellular filamentous except yeast, which is a unicellular organism. Reproduction can occur by means of vegetative, asexual, or sexual methods. Vegetative methods include fragmentation, fission, budding. Asexual method includes formation of spores like conidia, sporangiospores, zoospores. And sexual reproduction occurs by formation of oospores, ascospores, and basidiospores. Okay, so and when you talk about the sexual reproduction in fungi, the sexual cycle involves 3 stages, which are very, very important. The first one is called as the plasmogamy. So what is plasmogamy, students? Fusion of protoplasm between 2 gametes. And these gametes can be motile or non-motile. So fusion of protoplasm is called as plasmogamy. Fusion of 2 nuclei is called as karyogamy. And after karyogamy, the last stage is meiosis, which is nothing but which occurs in zygote. It is reduction division, which results in the formation of haploid spores. Okay, so these are the 3 stages. And one important thing here is, in certain groups of fungi, certain classes of fungi like Ascomycetes and Basidiomycetes, a unique feature you find, that is nothing but dikaryotic stage. Okay, so what is this dikaryotic stage? It is an intervening stage you find in Asco and Basidiomycetes, which is represented by N plus N. What is this N plus N? That means after plasmogamy, karyogamy does not occur, or karyogamy is delayed. In other words, I should say immediately karyogamy does not occur, it is delayed. So that results in the formation of N plus N stage, that is called as dikaryon. Phase is called as dikaryophase. Later the nuclei will fuse and the cells will become diploid. Okay, and this is feature of Ascomycetes and Basidiomycetes. So here you can see with the help of a diagram. So here this is a monokaryon cells which are having single nucleus. You can see on your screen, this is monokaryon. When after plasmogamy occurs, 2 nuclei will be there which do not fuse immediately. This stage is called as what? Dikaryon, and subsequently at the end they will fuse. Okay, so this is the thing about the sexual cycle of fungi. Let us come to the classes of fungi. So the fungi, the kingdom fungi is divided into different classes. What are the criteria? The criteria are morphology of mycelium, mode of spore formation, and fruiting bodies. Okay, these are the 3 things. I repeat, morphology of mycelium, mode of spore formation, and fruiting bodies. This forms the basic criteria. So based on that, we have different classes here. The number 1 is called as Phycomycetes. What is Phycomycetes? In Phycomycetes, the mycelium is aseptate and cenocytic. Asexual reproduction occurs by means of zoospores, which are motile structures, or by aplanospores, which are non-motile. And these spores are produced endogenously in the sporangium. With this, you have to remember, children, this is very important, whether the spore is endogenous or exogenous. So you should know that these spores are endogenously produced within the sporangium. Sexual reproduction occurs by means of zygospores, which is formed by the fusion of 2 gametes. Okay, and the examples under this category are mucor, rhizopus, which is commonly called as the bread mold, albico, the parasitic fungus on mustard. So these are unique features of the class that is Phycomycetes. Now we'll come to the next class, that is Ascomycetes. In Ascomycetes, the mycelium is said to be branched and septate. Okay, except Phycomycetes, in all other classes, the mycelium is branched and septate. That you must remember. Asexual spores occur by means, asexual spores are conidia, which occur exogenously on the special mycelium, which is called as conidiophore. Okay, so which are the sexual spores here? Conidia. And how are they produced? Exogenously. Okay, similarly we have sexual spores which are called as ascospores. Okay, and these ascospores are produced endogenously in sac-like structures called as asci. Okay, singular is ascus, plural we call it as asci, and usually you should know that these asci will be arranged in different types of fruiting bodies, and these fruiting bodies are called as ascocarp. Okay, what are they called as? Ascocarp. And examples under this category are Aspergillus, Claviceps, Neurospora, Morels, truffles, which are edible and considered as delicacies. One more important example which is not mentioned here is Saccharomyces cerevisiae, that is commonly called as yeast, also is included in this category. Okay. We have next class, that is Basidiomycetes, which includes mushrooms, bracket fungi, or puffballs. Okay. It also includes parasites like rust and smuts. Mycelium is branched and septate. Asexual spores are generally not found here in Basidiomycetes. Vegetative reproduction occurs by means of fragmentation. Important thing is sex organs are absent here in Basidiomycetes. And another important thing is dikaryotic structure gives rise to basidium. And the sexual spores are called as basidiospores, which are exogenously produced on the basidium. This is very important. And each basidium consists of 4 basidiospores. I repeat my words. Each basidium consists of 4 basidiospores here. Example under this category is Agaricus, Stilago, which is called as smut, Puccinia, which is called as the rust fungus. Now, the last class we have, that is nothing but the Deuteromycetes, commonly called as imperfect fungi. So, who are these organisms, students? In these organisms, only the asexual or vegetative phases of fungi are known. Okay. And what are the asexual spores? Conidia. How do they reproduce? They reproduce by means of conidia. The mycelium is septate and branched. Okay. And sexual reproduction under these group is not known. Once the sexual stage is reported or known, then they will be kept or assigned a proper classification. And commonly these organisms are decomposers of litter, helping mineral cycling. Example under this category are Alternaria, Coletotrichum, Trichoderma, etc. etc. So now students, with this we will come to the next part, that is viruses, viroids, prions and lichens. Okay, so viruses, what are these viruses? Okay, viruses are nothing but they do not have a place, or they are not placed in the 5 kingdom classification, since they are not truly considered as living organisms. Okay, they are the non-cellular organisms that are characterized by having an inert structure outside the living cell, or crystalline structure outside the living cell. Once they infect the host cell, they will take up the entire machinery and start to replicate, ultimately killing the host cell. So there's still a dilemma whether they should be considered as living or non-living organisms. Okay, and we have different concepts as per your textbook, that is contribution of different scientists like Pasteur, Ivanovsky, who recognize certain microbes responsible for the disease, that is tobacco mosaic disease. Okay, and Bejernik, another contribution given by the Bejernik, who demonstrated that the extract of infected plants of tobacco could cause infection in healthy plants. Another, and he gave the name to that fluid, that is Contagium vivum fluidum, which is nothing but infectious living fluid, what we say. And contribution of one more scientist, you must remember, that is Stanley, W.M. Stanley, who showed that viruses could be crystallized and stored in the form of crystals of proteins. Okay, so these were the different contributions given by scientists. In this picture, in this slide, you can see the picture of tobacco, TMV, tobacco mosaic virus bacteriophage, showing different parts. Okay, I'm not going into much details about this. I will come to the next part here, that is viroids. Okay, so viroids, what are these viroids? Viroids were first discovered in 1971 by T.O. Diner. These are the new infectious agent that was actually smaller than virus, and it was reported to cause a disease that is called as potato spindle tuber disease. Viroids are free RNA molecules. They do not have protein code that is found in viruses. Okay, and the RNA of the viroid is of low molecular weight as compared to that of a normal virus. Okay, similarly we have prions. What are these prions? Prions are nothing but, we say, abnormally folded proteins which have the ability to cause diseases. Their size is similar to those of viruses, and the commonly known diseases of prions are bovine serum encephalopathy, that is BSE, what we call, commonly called as mad cow disease in cattle, and its analog is nothing but CJD disease, that is Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, are known to be common in humans. Lichens, last part. Lichens, everybody is aware of symbiotic association between algae and fungi. Algal component is called as phycobiont, fungal component is called mycobiont. How do they help each other? Everybody is well aware of. Okay, and important thing is lichens are good pollution indicators. Specifically, they are sensitive to sulfur dioxide pollution. So with this, students, we have completed the chapter biological classification. Now I will give the details about this chapter, that is nothing but the plant kingdom. So in plant kingdom, let us have a brief idea about this chapter. In plant kingdom, the very first part what you have studied is systems of classification. In that, first thing is artificial system of classification. So what is this artificial system of classification? In this system, basically, only morphological characters were given importance, like habit of the plant, color, number, shape of leaves, form of leaves, etc., etc. And in artificial system, equal weightage was given to both vegetative as well as sexual characteristics. Okay, and this system remained for a longer time. Now it is not acceptable, since we know that vegetative characters are easily changeable under the influence of environmental conditions. So then natural system of classification came into existence. It was developed, and in natural system of classification, it is based on natural affinities among the organisms, and it considers not only morphology but also internal features like nature, anatomy of the cell, anatomy of the tissues, embryology, phytochemistry, phylogeny, etc., etc. Phytochemistry. Next, we have phylogenetic system, which is based on evolutionary relationships between the organisms. Okay, numerical taxonomy is also a very important method, which is carried out using computers. Okay, wherein numbers and codes are assigned to different characters, and then it is processed. Similarly, there is cytotaxonomy, in which is based on cytological information like number of chromosomes, structure of chromosome, behavior of chromosome, etc. And likewise, we have chemotaxonomy, in which the nature of chemical constituents of the plants are taken into consideration. So now, quickly moving ahead, if you just recall the chapter plant kingdom, what you have studied, children, is the kingdom Plantae is divided into different groups. Basically, plant kingdom is divided into two major groups, that is cryptogams and phanerogams, or spermatophytes, what we say. In cryptogams, we have thallophytes. Okay, we have thallophytes, we have bryophytes, and we have pteridophytes. Similarly, in phanerogams, we have gymnosperms and angiosperms. Okay, cryptogams are nothing but non-seed former. They do not form seeds. Phanerogams are spermatophytes, seed-forming plants. Okay, so in cryptogams, we have thallophytes. Under thallophytes, we have algae. Fungi is added here, but let us not consider here. Okay, we have under cryptogams, thallophytes, bryophytes, pteridophytes. Under phanerogams, gymno and angiosperms. In angiosperms, we have dicots and monocots as contents of angiosperms. Okay, so now let us come to the first group under this, that is algae. So what are these algae? Algae are the chlorophyll bearing simple thalloid autotrophic and largely aquatic organisms. The form and size is highly variable. They can be microscopic unicellular forms like chlamydomonas. They can be colonial forms like volvox. They can be filamentous like Ulothrix and Spirogyra. They show high economic importance, students. You all know what are their economic importance. I can just mention few, that is carbon dioxide fixation is one of the major contribution, okay, by which they increase the level of DO in the very immediate environment. And they are also acting as primary producers in the ecosystems. They are used as food. Nearly about more than what do you say, among the 70 different species of marine algae, many species are of Laminaria sargassum are used as food. Okay, and they are also used for the extraction of algin, carrageenan, agar, etc., etc. Okay, so these are the different economic importance. Reproduction, how it occurs in algae, they reproduce by vegetative, sexual and asexual methods. Okay, vegetative reproduction commonly occurs by fragmentation, asexual by zoospores, sexual reproduction by fusion of gametes. And sexual reproduction can be isogamous, anisogamous, oogamous. Isogamous, example Chlamydomonas, Spirogyra, where the nature of gametes are same. Okay, the nature of gametes are same. Okay, so for example, if you take when the gametes can be flagellated and similar in size in case of Chlamydomonas, or non-flagellated but similar in size in case of Spirogyra, both together, both are called as isogamy. Anisogamy, the nature of gametes, the gametes will be dissimilar in size. Example again, Chlamydomonas. Oogamy means fusion of one large non-motile female gamete and a smaller motile gamete. This is oogamy. Example, fucus and volvox. So this is the basic characteristics. These are the basic characteristics of algae. The table is shown here that depicts division of algae and their main characteristics. You should know that algae are divided into three basic classes: chlorophyceae, phaeophyceae, rhodophyceae. Their common names green, brown, and red algae respectively. Their pigments are different, like chlorophyceae with chlorophyll A and B as the major pigments. Similarly, chlorophyll A, C, and fucoxanthin in case of phaeophyceae, chlorophyll A, D, and phycoerythrin in case of rhodophyceae. Stored food differs in starch in case of green algae, mannitol laminar in brown algae, fluoridin starch in case of red algae. Cell wall nature is different. Flagellar number and positions of insertions are different. Important thing here to be remembered is in rhodophyceae, motile structures are absent. That is very important. In rhodophyceae, motile structures are absent. They produce non-motile gametes. Sexual reproduction occurs by means of non-motile gametes, even then it is referred to as oogamy. It is mentioned very clearly in NCERT that red algae reproduce asexually by non-motile spores and sexually also by non-motile gametes, and sexual reproduction is oogamous, which is accompanied by further developmental events. Okay, and similarly habitat can differ with respect to the different groups of algae. So here this table is used for depiction. The diagram depicts the different figures of different algae, like you can see volvox is given here, volvox, then Chlamydomonas, chara. Okay, similarly we have different groups like brown algae, laminaria, fucus, then we have dictyote as an example here. So these are the diagrammatic representations of different groups of algae. Now, without wasting time, we'll go to the next class, that is next group under the kingdom Plantae, that is bryophytes. So, bryophytes include the various mosses and liverworts that are found commonly growing in moist, shaded areas in the hills. They are commonly referred to as amphibians of the plant kingdom. Why they are called as amphibians? Because they live in soil, but they depend on water for sexual reproduction. Important point to be remembered here is plant body of a bryophyte is more differentiated, and plant body is basically represented by means of gametophyte. Okay, that is very important. Plant body of bryophyte is differentiated than that of algae. It is thallus-like. It can be prostrate or erect, attached to the substratum by means of rhizoids. These rhizoids can be unicellular and multicellular. They do not have true root, stems, or leaves. Okay, and the main plant body, as I said, is represented by a haploid gametophyte. Okay, which is very important point here. They have male sex organ as the antheridium, which produces biflagellate antherozoids. Female sex organ as archegonium, which is flask-shaped structure which usually produces a single ovum or egg. Fusion of gametes leads to the formation of zygote, and this zygote produces a multicellular sporophyte. Okay, and some of the cells of this sporophyte undergo meiosis or reduction division to produce haploid spores, and these spores finally germinate to produce once again gametophyte. So students, you can see the life cycle here, which is represented for a typical bryophytic organism. So gametophyte, which is nothing but the main plant body, which bears antheridia and archegonia, producing antherozoid and egg respectively, which fuse to form zygote. Zygote undergoes multiple normal equational division to form sporophyte, that is mitosis, and then it forms the 2n spore mother cell by mitosis, and after that some of these cells in sporophyte undergo meiosis to form haploid spores. Okay, which is haploid spores, which is gametophytic generation, and then this germinate to give rise to ultimately once again gametophyte. Either it can be by means of protonema or buds. It depends on different based on which group it is, whether liverworts or mosses. Okay, so this is the basic life cycle here. So, and these bryophytes are divided into liverworts and mosses. Liverworts plant body is thalloid, example Mertensia. Thallus can be dorsiventral and closely oppressed to the substrate. Okay, leafy members have tiny leaf-like appendages in two rows on these stem-like structures. They undergo asexual reproduction by means of fragmentation of thalli, formation of specialized structures called as gemmae. Okay, they also show formation of structures, special structures called as gemmae, and these gemmae are developed in small receptacles which are called as gemma cups. Okay, sexual reproduction by presence of male and female sex organs, and these male and female sex organs can be produced either on the same or on different thalli, and sporophyte is differentiated into different parts, that is food, seta and capsule. Okay, so this is about the liverworts, example Mertensia, as I said. So Mertensia is a dioecious organism, two different forms you can see here, male and female thallus respectively, producing anthridiophore and archegoniophore. Okay, so similarly now we have funaria as an example for mosses here. Okay, so mosses, what are these mosses? The gametophyte in mosses consists of two stages, which is very important. Two stages. The first is called protonema stage. Second one is called as the leafy stage. Okay, and important thing here is protonema develops directly from the spore. Okay, and leafy stage develops from the secondary protonema in the form of a bud. Leafy stage is one which is having the sex organs, and mosses reproduce vegetatively by fragmentation budding. Okay, in the secondary protonema, sexual reproduction is normal because they are same anthridia and archegonia. Okay, and zygote formation ultimately forming sporophyte with the same parts, and examples under this category is funaria, polytrichum and sphagnum. The next group is pteridophyte. The first pteridophytes are the first terrestrial plants to possess vascular tissues, that is xylem and phloem. The main plant body is sporophyte. Very important thing, children. The main plant body here is sporophyte, unlike the algae and bryophyte, wherein the main body was gametophyte. Okay, and this sporophyte is differentiated into true root stem leaves, which are showing presence of vascular tissue. Leaves can be small, leaves can be large. If the leaves are small, they are called microphylls. If the leaves, as in case of Selaginella, or they can, if they are large, they are called macrophylls, as in case of ferns. The sporophyte bears sporangia, okay, which are subtended by leaf-like appendages called as sporophylls. Very important point. The sporangia are present, which are subtended by leaf-like appendages, which are known as sporophylls. And in some cases, these sporophylls will form distinct compact structures, which are called as strobili or cones. Okay, and these sporangia produce spores. What is the function of sporangia? You should know. Sporangia are designed to produce spores by meiosis. Okay, and the spores will later germinate to give rise to a inconspicuous, small but multicellular, free living, mostly photosynthetic thalloid gametophyte, which is called as prothallus. A very important point here, students. Prothallus. So what is this prothallus? Prothallus is nothing but it is the gametophyte of pteridophyte is called as prothallus. These organisms, pteridophytes, can be homosporous or heterosporous. What is the meaning of homo and heterosporous? They produce same type of spores, which are called, if this, all these spores are of similar kind, they are called as homosporous. If the spores are of two different types, that is macrospores and micro, that is large and small pores, they are called as heterosporous. Heterosporous example is Selaginella and Salvinia. Okay, and in heterosporous types, particularly in heterosporous types, the female gametophyte in these plants are retained on the parent sporophyte for variable periods, and the development of zygote into young embryos takes place within the female gametophyte, which is a precursor event to seed habit. This is very important. The seed habit first is reported in pteridophyte because the female gametophyte in these plants is retained on the parent sporophyte for different periods, and this is the first event precursor to the seed habit, which is a very important step in evolution. Okay, and these pteridophytes are further classified into four classes, as you know: Psilopsida, Lycopsida, Sphenopsida and Pteropsida, with their respective examples. So now we'll come to quickly the group that is gymnosperms. So what are these gymnosperms? Gymnosperms are those plants which are generally considered naked seeded plants, okay, because they do not, the seed is not covered actually, so they are naked seeded plants. They have some basic characters like roots are generally tap roots, okay, and they show the presence of mycorrhizae, that is fungal association, symbiotic association with fungi. The roots can also be coralloid, as in case of cycas. Okay, coralloid roots show association with blue-green algae for the fixation of nitrogen. Okay, the BG are present for nitrogen fixing, for nitrogen fixation. Cyanobacteria are there. In pinus, fungi are there. The stems can be unbranched, like in case of cycas, or branched in case of pinus and cedrus. Leaves can be simple or compound. All the gymnosperms are heterosporous organisms. Okay, they produce haploid microspores and megaspores, and these two kind of spores are produced within the sporangia, which are borne on sporophylls. Okay, and similarly these will be clustered, okay, or to form structures called as strobili or cones. And in that regard, there will be male strobili and female strobili, which may be borne on the same tree like pinus, or on different trees like cycas. Okay, and multicellular female gametophyte will bear two or more archegonia or female sex organs. The female sex organ is archegonia here. Okay, and the male and female gametophytes do not have an independent free living existence. This is a very important point. The plant body is sporophyte here, but the gametophyte is not independent. It is dependent. It does not have any independent free living state. Means gametophytes are dependent on the sporophyte. This you have to remember. Okay, and another thing here is, in gymnosperms, you should remember that the megaspore mother cell will give rise to the a megaspore, a functional 4 megaspores. Okay, one of the megaspores will be enclosed within the megasporangium, which will develop into multicellular female gametophyte that will have archegonia, or the female sex organ, and that in that way normal sexual reproduction occurs here. Okay, and then leads to formation of zygote and further embryo development, and they show alternation of generation similar to the other groups. Okay, and now the last group is angiosperms. I will not go into details because we have another chapter, okay, where in detail you have studied about angiosperm. Things here to be highlighted are, they are divided into two classes, mono and dicots. Male sex organ is called stamen, female sex organ is carpel or pistil. Embryo sac is haploid 7-celled 8-nucleate structure. One unique feature of angiosperm is they show double fertilization. Plant body is represented by diploid sporophyte. Gametophyte is dependent on sporophyte. Okay, so these are the plant life cycles and alternation of generation. So we have three different types of life cycles in this chapter what we have studied: haplontic life cycle, diplontic and haplodiplontic life cycle. Haplontic life cycle is exhibited by many groups of algae, that is volvox, Spirogyra and Chlamydomonas. Okay, here mainly there is no free-living sporophyte. Meiosis occurs in the zygote, which leads to the formation of haploid spores. Okay, in diplontic life cycle exhibited by gymnosperms and angiosperm children, wherein the dominant phase is again sporophyte, which is independent photosynthetic phase. Gametophyte is represented by few single to few celled haploid structure, and gametophyte is dependent on sporophyte. Last one, we have haplodiplontic life cycle. Haplodiplontic life cycle, pteridophytes and bryophytes are the examples. Okay, wherein basically in haplodiplontic types, the plant body can be a gametophyte or plant body can be a sporophyte. In case of bryophytes, it is gametophyte, and in case of pteridophytes, it is sporophyte. So this is the haplodiplontic type of life cycle. Exceptions are there, you should know, in some algae. Like for example, Ectocarpus, Polysiphonia, kelps are haplodiplontic, and Fucus is diplontic. Okay. So these are the different types of plant life cycles, and the details about this chapter, plant kingdom. Now we have completed. madam.
Hello, madam. Ha, madam. You have ended, madam. Hello. Hello.
Hello, madam.
Did you end, madam? You have end, no?